Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. This is the October 21st CSSU Board of School Directors meeting. If you're on the wrong plane, now would be a time to leave. Let's see, adjustments to the agenda. Any adjustments? Okay.
Taking up so much space.
Audience and communications, I see we're making up time quickly here. Dave, there's lots of seats up here.
I don't know if it's you or me.
I know, we're doing the two of us.
It's like sitting too close to the teacher.
In the front row.
There, that's much better.
Chopped liver? What's up
No,
with
you're
that?
not. You're not.
All right, well, as we go lightning speed through the agenda, we're up to presentations, the SU Purchase Services presentation.
Mr. Mason.
Nice podium.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Bear with me while we get the,
You want this one? I thought I just hit it and it's green up there.
Yeah, I have it on mute.
Oh, you have it on mute. Okay, this is your short form purchase services presentation. Some significant changes this year in purchase services. This is the budget year where we move all of special ed and consolidate it on the SU books. So we've made a change to the core circle, separating out student services and special education. We shortened the list of purchase services because a number of services that used to be purchased are now part of student services. Questions on that slide? It all makes sense to everyone? This is for 15-16, so this is the second and final step of consolidation of special ed at the SU level. I'll run through the purchase services just to make sure you're familiar with each category. Information technology is Mike Camphor's group. We don't anticipate any staffing changes, and consistent with prior years, we will split his group based on ADM count. Connecting Youth, Christine, the SAPs, and the mentoring program. We don't anticipate any staffing changes within this budget area, but conversations are ongoing with Shelburne and Charlotte that may have an impact on decision packets either at CY, but more likely at Shelburne or at Charlotte once Christine and the schools finish conversations with services and scope for the 15-16 year.
Bob, on CY, just remind us, because we had a lot of conversations last year about how we budget for CY.
For the first time in a number of years, you're going to budget for CY the same way you budgeted in the current year, which is we put all of the expenses of CY on the books at CSSU, and then we use offsetting revenue to reduce the assessments that are shown in each of your schools. Prior years, we didn't quite put the full picture up. We put net expenses after revenue or only board subsidy of some sort. Now we've got all the expenses of the operation recorded, and the offsetting revenue is there as well.
Is that assessed back by ABM?
Pardon?
Is it assessed by ABM? How do we assess it?
No,
back?
I think it is assessed by the scope of services in each school. So we artfully nailed down exactly what breadth each school has in either mentoring or SAP, and then allocated the costs appropriate for those services.
Which way is that scope going for Shelburne and Charlotte?
This is getting dangerous because it requires my recall of conversations earlier in the week. I'm going to guess, I'll leave it to Megan because she'll remember better than I will.
It has to do with looking at the role of SAPs and what other folks in the system potentially do part of that role and looking at it that way. Okay. So it's more about whether or not they need their SAP to continue to do all of the things their SAP continues to do, or whether or not there's another resource in the system that can do part of that.
Like health taking over some of
Correct.
the wellness pieces
Yep.
of not engaging in substance use.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks.
Can't see why. Food service, no changes here. It includes, as a reminder, food service directors, the expenses associated with them, and all employees at CVU and most of the employees at Williston. And those costs are collected and specified by school and then allocated back to the school's food service budget from CSSU. Transportation, again, no changes. Ken Martin runs the program along with Pat Ward and operates and supports all but Charlotte pre-K-8. A change this year, Charlotte's pre-K-8 transportation expenses will show up on the CSSU budget and then be allocated back dollar for dollar to Charlotte. We're required by law to provide services for transportation at an SU level. We have interpreted that as we'll sign the contract, we'll provide the setting for Charlotte to have transportation, and they manage it from there.
We'll see an improvement here because we're done paying CVU for the outstanding work they did on the bus barn.
Yes, and I will outline that. Jean is correct that in transportation, this is the last year that the CSSU Transportation Group pays for the generosity CVU extended 5 years ago or 4 years ago, paving the bus barn area. We're planning to have you consider spending some of that money on the replacement of a vehicle that's quite a number of years old in the transportation group, but we'll get to that when we do decision packets. And costs are assessed based on services provided to each school. English language learners include 6 full-time professionals across all schools, and the staffing is based on the required level of services needed in each school. And as you all know, that need can change as the year progresses, so this is one that Molly comes back to you periodically and says, the count was done again and we need another 2/10 or something like that to support the added kids in a particular school. Early Learning Partnership is you providing resources to eligible or participating local preschools in your community through tuition support to parents. We manage the program at CSSU, and then we assess to you the costs of managing the program plus the tuition payments that you make at each school. The CSSU leg of it covers the management of the program expense, and we don't anticipate that changing significantly year to year. This chart has been in your packets prior years, but it's far simpler. 3 columns have been removed. The only areas that you're looking at in purchase services are IT, CY, food, transportation, ELL, and ELP. So you as boards need to indicate that you're on board again for another year for those sorts of things, and if you aren't, you need to tell us rather quickly so we can recast everybody else's with you out. So this is what you're going to affirm as part of your local discussion tonight, we hope. Questions on anything in purchase services? A review of the meetings you've got in front of you as a CSSU board. The next meeting is on November 18th. We're going to review the core budget, the first of a special education presentation, and we will give you a definitive list of what decision packets you will have to consider as the process unfolds. You have 2 meetings beyond the 18th, December 3rd and December 17th, to actually do budget work, and then you finalize and preliminarily adopt on January 7th, finishing your process at CSSU for budget. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob. Reports to the board, 5.1, Colt report.
Well, I would just point out that there are a couple kudos there you might want to pay attention to. Our Charlotte and Heinsberg Community School 8th graders tied for 2nd place in the state for science scores. And while science scores weren't great in the state, we were still tied for 2nd. You know, I mean, there are a lot of reasons why science scores can be wiggy. There's so much content you could be assessing. It's you know, they decide each year whether what the task is going to be and that kind of thing. But I think that's something to be hugely proud about. There are few things. Oh, we have our spelling champions who will be competing against other people in the whole Champlain Valley, our 5th and 6th graders from Williston and 7th and 8th graders from Heinsberg, who are our champions. So I want to point that out, and I will just try to make this quick here, but just this week I got a letter from the Department of Education giving huge credit to one of our employees at the SU, Kathy Delman, for some work she had done around HQT, because every year we get this huge long list, and it is impossible to decipher how it is that they come up with who's HQT and not. And so she developed a chart, sent it to them, and they then said they will be using her chart to do the rest of them. So I want to acknowledge that we have some great employees that many of them are like behind a desk somewhere, and none of you guys ever see that, but they are doing amazing work on our behalf that makes a difference. Megan, maybe you want to say a little bit about the pre-K grant. I'm sure everybody read the Colt report, but they might not have picked up that we are not applying for the grant, and maybe you want to say why.
So with very short notice, the Agency of Education let folks know that they were applying for a pre-K expansion grant. And so we went through a few meetings regionally to find out a little bit more about what that means. It's a really exciting grant opportunity for some communities. The goal is to expand full-day pre-K opportunities for 4-year-olds who live at or below 200% of the poverty line. And so exciting opportunity, but as an SU, we don't have a critical mass of students, they're very young, but who fit that demographic. And so there are 2 and potentially 3 school systems in Chittenden County who are signing on to apply with the state, but at this point our demographic doesn't match that piece, and I think we've got quite a bit going on around early ed in general. So.
And we are concerned about what will happen at the end of the four-year grant, and who will still be required then to pay for a service that people have become accustomed.
Right. There's very significant, one of the hallmarks of the grant is elevating the rate of pay that the center that partners with the system, the teachers, their salary would need to be commensurate with the public school salary where they are. And this is a grant that is at most 4 years, and 1 year at a time, really, of those 4 years. So there is the potential for quite a cliff for that system to be able to maintain that.
Thank you. That's it from us.
Any other questions on the Colt report? I did think was interesting, teachers ratified the settlement is way buried in the Colt report, which that was a tremendously positive thing for our school district. And thanks again to everybody who was involved with that, Cindy and all the board members who suffered through all the meetings, and good to have a little positive outcome. Regional VSBA meeting debrief, 5.2. Everybody remember that? It was a couple weeks ago.
Seems like a long.
Well, it does seem like a long time ago. Who went to it? Quite a few folks around this table. You want to, Colleen, you want to?
I'll start and then others can jump in. And for those of you who've been to these before, usually it's a very small group of people that show up. And there were over 100 people in attendance. I mean, in 2 regions of the state. And we did nominate Lorna for the board, and Lorna graciously, put herself out there. If it had been a small group and there was not a lot of interest, I'm sure Lorna would have been a shoo-in, but others, had been established on the board, and
I just wanted to say, it was the wrong time to run. I think the woman that's there now is outstanding, and I really, if I were thinking quickly, I would have just said, another time.
but I think what it did is I think there's a real positive. It showed that there's interest in the board, for one thing, and it showed that Chittenden South wants to be at the table. So I really appreciate, Lorna, that you did that. So thank you for doing that. I know that was hard.
Anytime.
Others should add what they want.
The highlight, I thought, of the meeting was a presentation by,
Rebecca Holcomb?
what's her name?
Rebecca Holcomb,
Rebecca
Secretary Holcomb.
Holcomb, who is like a breath of fresh air. And she has, I'm so impressed. I think she has a extremely good talent for speaking to the main issues and being very thoughtful about it, and not just accepting the status quo. And I know that part of why I'm saying that is because of her very public statement about the limitations of standardized testing. It's the, you really don't hear that usually from a commissioner of education or a secretary of education. And I thought that she was being quite honest and took a risk in saying that, which I appreciated. So she's good. It's good. I think we're in good hands. It's very good to say that.
And then, of course, most of the meeting was the situation analysis
Yeah.
situation with, and you sent that out, right?
Yes.
Yeah, everyone should take a look. If you hadn't seen that presentation, you should take a look. It's very, it's great to actually get facts and thoughts down very crisply and clearly, because it's going into legislature, it's going to be very complicated. There's a lot of things flying around. It's just good to have something at your fingertips if you need, to think straight about something. So,
I understand that Rebecca's PowerPoint will be made available in the near future, and as soon as it is, I will forward it to all of you.
okay. 5.3, Communications Committee Report.
And just to remind you, there is an action item related to that also, so
Right.
the request,
Yeah.
okay?
So Kim is here. She was at the meeting. Bob Finn was at the meeting. Keith Roberts and myself. Williston couldn't quite attend. I'll just give you a little quick debrief, because remember, this isn't actually a board committee. The boards got together and kind of talked through what each of us are doing for communications, and if there's any ways that we could collaborate more closely or get some efficiencies. So basically, we discussed the various communication plans from the school districts. CVU has a pretty clear written proposed plan with articles that go out to all the towns each month. Heinsberg, Shelburne, and Charlotte, I'd say are a bit more ad hoc, as something comes, the concept of a monthly board corner or editorial is there, but they tend to use it as the board has something they feel strongly to communicate. Is that fair? So as a group, we kind of agreed to three things. One is that there was value in piggybacking on the CVU articles that apply K-12. And that we should find a way to, I'm using piggybacking kind of broadly, but there was something, if you're talking about the negotiation process or special ed consolidation or data-driven decision-making, something that applies it broadly, that the team at the table said it would be great to share that more broadly with all the communities. And the thing we did not solve, we solved a lot of things, but not that, is that the problem is that the banner says CVU, and we're a little afraid that people who don't have kids at CVU may not read it. So probably a little more thinking needs to go into play as to how that can happen, and also an acknowledgement that it is CVU's board who's putting it together. It's a very CVU pointed article. So anyways, there's value to it. Didn't have a solution on how to make that happen, but there is value to it. The second one was that it would be great to develop a common searchable forum for articles that everyone writes in some sort of a Google Drive or something along that line, so that if a board does just say, hey, I want to write about the budget, they can easily go back and see what was done in other years by other towns, and maybe make it a little easier than starting with a white page. And finally is that we should put more thought into this plan for the 2015-16 school year, maybe a retreat topic or some group that gets together over the summer to put a little more thought into it. We're running pretty fast at this point in September, October, and CVU's got their plan, so this year's probably not the time to do it. But those were kind of the three things that we kicked around and thought made a lot of sense. Kim, Bob, you got anything you want to add to that? so that's really the report from our meeting. And then, as Elaine said, we have an action item a little bit later on CVU's request for some support from central office to support their communication plan. So
So when you say CVU has their plan set for the year, set for like rolling out the budget communications, is that?
do you want to talk to that, Susan?
No, I mean, we'll have one article. We've just laid out for each month what
each
topic
topics.
we'd like our article to be about. So we'll have one that will be about the budget, but they range from, well, I can tell you some of them, that the data-driven educational decision-making will be a topic, school behavior and programs around student discipline will be a topic. So some of them are going to be very CVU focused, most of them will be, and there will be a couple that will be more broadly applicable to all of the
Yeah.
schools in the district, so.
I mean, I could see benefit to the K-8s tagging on to that, because first of all, if you have families that have kids in the two different levels, that's helpful. And also the issues, even though they're specific to a particular age population, the 9 through 12, the topics generally are applicable, or, you know, the organizations are applicable to all of us. So I'm wondering, I just know that in Heinsberg, we always struggle with, okay, who's going to write Board's Corner, or, you know, what's the topic, and we want to keep it short. I would really love to be able to lift some information from CVU people who are already doing the work.
Or even just
Plagiarize a little bit.
even just to have the list in advance, like,
Yeah.
forward that to, you know, the bigger groups.
Yeah,
So that if we know you're gonna do data, even if we don't wanna do the same, maybe our article,
Kind of-
the in-between week complements what yours is.
Right, so if it's
right.
Help
behavior.
us figure out what we wanna write
Right, we
about.
can talk about PBIS in Heinsberg for the K-8s, and you're talking about behavior management in the 9-12. To me, it makes sense to hit the topics, and in data-driven decision-making, I mean, that's happening across the SU.
Right, right. So this is all in a Google Doc, and
Yeah.
I'm happy to share it with, just email me and I can give you the link to it, so.
Great,
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great.
Makes
just
sense.
Planning it out like that, that's huge.
And the committee's gonna scratch their heads a little bit and figure out, as they put it together, is there a way to make it at least look like something that people who don't have kids at CVU might wanna read, you know, I don't know if we did.
We're gonna think about that.
Yeah, think about that one a
Yeah.
little bit.
Yeah.
Can I make a comment about that?
Yeah.
As a parent with 2 6th graders, I feel like still I'm not well informed about just the whole cultural or much about CVU, and I think I try to pay attention. So I would say I don't think you can give parents too much information. I don't think it would be, I wouldn't be opposed to giving every parent who has a child in a school that goes to CVU this information unfettered from or unedited.
Oh, it's
completely.
not, I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. I didn't mean to say it was edited. I'm just saying that most people with a second grader wouldn't see an article as headline CVU at a glance and necessarily pick it up. But you can't just say it's CSSU or
understand,
CVU
right.
/ Shelburne if it's really never mentions anything except the high school.
I wouldn't be reluctant to send that out because I wouldn't
Oh, it
have,
just goes out
I
in all the
wouldn't have
papers.
that worry. I think most people would be interested to read a document about CVU if they have a second grader.
Yeah, it definitely goes.
Just my opinion.
It does go out in all the papers. That's not the issue. It's just a matter
Right,
of
yeah.
titling it or something, that's all.
And if we frame it under education, that is something that is, I think, essential information to everybody.
Yeah.
That's my spin, but as opposed to a school. Because
Right.
sometimes you see something really exciting going on. Williston, I don't live there. Well, it's education of students
Right.
in the state.
Right.
So,
Right.
That's right. Sneak in, you gotta sit next to the board chair.
That's what you get for being.
Like sit in the front for the church. Okay, well, thank you very much for those people who did attend another night out of your life that you did school stuff, but it was I think helpful, and we'll try to move forward a little bit more next year, a little more organized fashion. Okay, we are at discussion matters 6.1, and we have a special guest today.
We do. Steve Dale, come on up. Steve Dale, come on up. We'll squeeze you right in there. So everyone, this is Steve Dale. He is the executive director of your organization, the Vermont School Boards Association. You're very lucky to have someone of Steve's intellect, humor, character as your executive director. And he's here to chat with you tonight about a few important things. I'm
Great.
guessing.
Thank you. Just want to make sure I'm clear on the time. I like to hold straight to time. What do you have me down for?
I'll get you down
15,
for
20 minutes?
Yeah, about 15, 20 minutes.
All right, good. That's all I'll take. First of all, I want to thank you for having me. I've been in this job now going on 4 years. There's about 3 supervisory unions that I have not been to, and believe it or not, it's not that I haven't been here, but I haven't been to your meeting. And it's largely been because our board meetings are scheduled on the same night that you have been scheduled for all these. And I think you just changed recently, which is terrific. So I'm very glad to be able to connect with you as a large group. It's doubly important because you all are held up in this state. I know when you're on a particular board or you live in a particular community, you don't get the full perspective of what's happening across the whole state of Vermont. But one of my benefits of my job is that I get to see Vermont in its great diversity, and it is an extremely diverse state, contrary to popular representations. And you all are held up as one of the shining lights in this state from a lot of perspectives. One is you have incredible administrators, Elaine and Bob, and Cindy I've known for many years. And I just came from Winooski, where the state board was meeting all day, and Sean was able to show people around the Winooski district, and you've done well by propagating great education leadership across the state. Bill Gardner's a legend in the state and has done great things. So anyway, you have a lot to be proud of, not only in terms of what you've achieved here, but how you've spread your wealth around. So it's greatly appreciated. We also talk a lot about you all as boards, and of course, I'm always a little nervous about that because I hadn't been here before, so I'm talking based on conversations with Colleen and others. But even the fact that you obviously are boards that know your role, perform it well, and have figured out how to make this unbelievably complex structure that we've created in Vermont work. I mean, this is a big meeting. Could have been a lot of people, but frankly, it's been impressive how you've taken this structure and made it work. Figured out how to make it work in an extraordinary fashion. So anyway, I want to just recognize for you all what you may not realize, that you are recognized around the state as extraordinary. There were 3 things I wanted to do with my time, and I will do them very quickly. One was just to make a personal connection, because we do exist for you. We're a membership organization. We exist to help board members perform their duties as individuals and as boards. And we exist to be the collective voice of the school boards of Vermont, and that's no small, simple task, because as you might guess, perception varies in the state, and there are people with different perspectives on almost any subject. However, we see our job is to make sure that people remember in the state debates, and I'm often with Elaine at different meetings where we're having these discussions, that in Vermont, education is a joint responsibility. The Constitution basically gives the responsibility to the legislature. The legislature created school boards 1 million years ago. And the delivery of education is both from the policy perspective, in terms of the administration of a statewide funding formula, is a state obligation and is overseen by the legislature. But the responsibility for what happens in your communities, delivering a high-quality education to every student at a reasonable price for taxpayers, is your job. And my job is to make sure that people constantly remember that this is a joint endeavor, and people need to continually be attentive to the fact that, number one, there are all kinds of citizens in the state who are totally committed to performing their duties and performing them well, and they are in a much better position to be making day-to-day decisions about the education of their children, and that it's important to not be thinking that there are simple solutions that can get fashioned. In Montpelier, by the same token, we try to be strong partners with them. We don't see our task as being to defend the status quo at all costs. We have some serious problems in this state. As I've said, you guys as an endeavor are really at the top of the pack in this state in terms of what you produce for a product and the opportunities that your kids get that stand up against the best in any state in the United States. But we have places that are in deep trouble, and so our job is not to just say, hey, we're all great everywhere in the state, and there's no reason to be willing to look critically, but our job is to make sure that the voices of school boards are heard in that, and that we try to make sure there's some reason and some balance, and sometimes we succeed and sometimes we don't. But that's part of our job as well. So part of the reason I'm here was just to make a personal connection, because we do urge you as boards to feel free to use our services that I'll talk to you about in a second. When you call, there's only 4 of us, so you're either going to get me or you're going to get Nicole, who's our attorney, who's terrific, and I don't know if she's been to any of your individual boards, but she spends most of her days on the phone with board members or board chairs trying to figure out legal issues. Not that we deliver the legal service for you, but oftentimes we can help you know whether you need to be going for the direct legal services or not. But she has developed a great level of expertise. Harry Frank, who does a lot of board training for us, and Carrie Lamb, who's the one that communicates mostly with you all when you get a lot of emails and so on from us. So it's just the 4 of us, and we welcome your calls. That's why we exist. So part of it was to make the personal connection. Part was to go through with you very quickly who we are and what we offer. And then the last was, to the degree that we have 5 minutes or so at the end, if there are things that you would be dying to convey to our organization, and things either that we absolutely shouldn't be doing, something that you love, something that you're most worried about at this moment in time, you can feel free to, we can do a quick some quick shots. I know we don't have all that much time, but you can also send me emails after we're done here. If you want to go into any deeper discussion of issues that are of concern, I'm at your disposal, but I know my time is limited, so I'll make my time quick, and if you want to do other things, you can let me know, Madam Chair.
Okay.
So there's 5 areas that we operate in that are in this sheet, and I'll just go to the blue pages in the middle. One, it's labeled advocacy, but it's the one I just described. Secondly is board training and support. How many of you have ever been to one of our new board member trainings? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. There's several of you. Okay. So we train new board members. We also do a lot of training for boards. So, for example, if this board said, we are really worried about the new open meeting law, for example, as has been the case with some boards, they will call us up and say, could we have Nicole come down and do a training? We will do that kind of thing. So, and different boards have different needs. So we spend a lot of our time doing those things. We do have consulting services. We help boards with superintendent searches. Hopefully you'll never need one of those again. We do a lot of work with boards if they're trying to do strategic planning, or if they're wanting to explore the different governance options that are out there. We do that kind of work. Communications, most of you get in fact, you should all be getting, we do VSBA updates when there's big things happening. I know how emails look when you get them from organizations, and so hopefully we're not just filling up your mailboxes, but we do urge you to take a glance at the things that we're sending out. Usually they're items that have some significance for board members. We publish a newsletter 3 times a year. We do the legislative reports throughout the session. Did folks get those regularly throughout the last year? So Nicole edits those, develops those, and we try to keep you well informed about what's happening. As you see those, if you've got either positions that you're worried about or things that you'd like conveyed, or if you if there's something this board took a particular interest in and wanted to have your voice heard in a particular way, like testifying, we are happy to work with boards to help organize that and make sure that you have the opportunities to be heard. I should have mentioned Lorna earlier. She's a former board member of the VSBA, and we appreciated your willingness to put yourself forward the other night in the for office, and we love contested races for our board seats. And legal and policy services, I've already mentioned what Nicole does. We also do a lot of work with policy. I don't know where you're at with your policy situation, but we have a number of boards in the state that have challenges with keeping policies up to date, and there are a lot of things we can do to help you with that. So those are just some big categories. But again, whenever you're dealing with an issue relative to either your work as an individual board member or as boards trying to figure out how to deal with a particular problem, as you might guess, boards go through cycles. They go through high functioning cycles, and they go through difficulties, and occasionally you'll read about them. I'm sure in Chittenden County, occasionally a board has a problem, and we're resourced to try to help you deal with that. So I'll stop there. I guess I'll ask if there are any questions or if there are any comments or suggestions for us.
Quick question.
Sure.
What's the VSBA strategy in terms of single-payer healthcare or healthcare reform in Vermont, and how we're engaged in the legislature?
Wow, that's a question. That's a perfect segue into a sales pitch. I'm hoping some of you will be coming to our conference next week, Thursday and Friday. Friday morning, we will be spending time talking about the emergence of whatever ends up emerging relative to single payer or otherwise. The key leaders from the Shumlin administration will be there to talk to us. We've been trying to engage them in two thoughts. First is, we haven't taken it upon ourselves to say we absolutely should be going to single payer or not. It doesn't seem that that's necessarily our issue. But what is our issue is if we are going to change our system, as we are in the midst of and as we will in some form, there are reasons to believe that there are substantial savings to be had from the change. And the question is, what's going to happen to those savings? Will they be guaranteed to hold employees harmless in terms of every dollar for dollar, or should some portion of that savings go to taxpayers in essence? And we need to begin to have that conversation. We have attempted to have that conversation on a number of occasions. Last session, there was language introduced in a particular bill that would have said any savings would, in essence, go to mitigate any impact on education employees, as opposed to, that's what it said. It basically was a carve-out for protecting education employees, and our belief is that if we are going to a new paradigm as a state where every citizen gets good coverage, which is what's designed, at a reasonable price, a reasonable copay, and so on, we should not necessarily assume that education employees should have Platinum Plus plans that are funded 90, it varies district to district, but it's anywhere from 100% by some school districts to, I think, the low is about 80% in terms of the percentage that the school district pays. But our employees have very, very, very generous healthcare plans compared to the norm in the state. We want them to have good healthcare coverage. we don't want in any way to have any kind of a punitive stance on this, but we're in the process of changing, and all these things need to be on the table. And so that's our focus has been on that issue. There will be a report released next week by us about this issue and about the potential savings that would exist if we were to move to single payer, and we'll be basically making that case. Yes?
I was looking at the Free Press Online the other day, and there was a brief headline that said, Shumlin supports ban on teacher strikes or something to that effect. And I thought for a brief moment that he was actually going to take a leadership position on something related to education. And when I opened the article, I quickly discovered I was wrong, that it seemed basically he was parroting a position of the Vermont NEA, which sure will give up strikes if we can have binding arbitration. So I'm curious if the VSBA is looking at that or has a position on that.
We do, and it was, I was quoted last week in the middle of all that, but it's down in these articles. We are very opposed to binding arbitration. First of all, we shouldn't allow teacher strikes. I was at a meeting of all the other school boards associations in the northeastern part of the state, including New York, Maryland, Delaware, and all of New England, and so on, last week. And there is not another state in the Northeast that allows teacher strikes. So it is, I mean, as I'm watching what's going on in Vermont while I'm at this meeting, I'm thinking, we got to do better. I mean, there's got to be another way here. This is what was going on back when we were paying our teachers. I mean, we needed the full-blown set of options back in the 70s when we were paying when our teachers were paid 49th in the United States, and the system just wasn't working to get to a fair place. We are in such a different place today than we were then that it doesn't make any sense. So we are way out of step with anybody else relative to strikes. Binding arbitration as a solution, we have been very opposed to, and we're never opposed to exploring the wide range of options that might be out there. So I don't want to get into sort of, we shouldn't ever talk about anything, but our position on binding arbitration is that it is a seemingly simple solution that has enormous implications, which you implied. Binding arbitration basically gives an independent arbiter the ability to make decisions that elected officials ought to be accountable for. It makes an unaccountable person, gives them the authority to basically decide how much your community is going to pay for its salary and fringe. So we don't think that should be in any way given up as the solution to this issue. And so my question to people is, if you're not going to do binding arbitration, for those of you that may not have spent a lot of time on this, is basically where at the end of the day, when you're all finished, each party delivers a product to an independent arbiter, and in the most likely scenario, the person would choose either A or B, which then means that both parties will end up trying to be as unimaginative as you could possibly be, because if you try to do something outside of the norm, your choice is not likely to be chosen. And given the dynamic environment that we're in, both economically and educationally, we need to be in a place where we're thinking very creatively about our employee contracts in terms of the work hours and the length of the school year and the location of instruction and how much time kids are out in communities being instructed by a wide range of people, and the healthcare environment. I mean, it's all so dynamic that model would force people to be very conservative and would pretty much guarantee would be at status quo or very slight variations thereof. So we are very opposed. We think it would be a big mistake for the legislature to go down that road as a means of simply preventing strikes. Having said that, we shouldn't have strikes, and we should have another alternative. And most states in the Northeast have another alternative. And I'm not going to go into all the details of it, but most of it requires that you stay at it and you keep at it. And there's, a lot of states do this thing they call work to rule, which is not, I don't like that either. But given the choices of strikes, so work to rule is basically where teachers say we're going to rigidly adhere to the contract. If it says you're done at 3:30, everybody's out at 3:30. We're not going to do references for high school seniors. We're not going to do chaperoning of activities. I mean, it's that kind of stuff, which is obviously nasty, awful. No teacher wants to do it. No communities want to do it. But if the choice is a teacher strike, where the whole community is thrown into chaos and is at each other's throats, so we have to be willing to look at the full range of options that are being used across the country. And I was very concerned about the governor jumping to binding arbitration as the solution.
So it's going to use a chair rule on this and give over by 3 minutes if you can answer in 3 minutes. Given dynamic, this is going to be a very dynamic legislative session. Can you
Yes.
just explain how the VSBA comes to the decisions that they do? I know it's the board and everything, but how do you react, just the process of reacting during the legislative session?
Okay, there are three things that happen. First of all, we have formal resolutions that are passed at our annual meeting, and our annual meeting will be held next Thursday afternoon, week from Thursday afternoon. And so we have a number of resolutions that are actually online. You can look at them on our website that give us guidance. And we try not to get really specific, because when you're in these conversations, part of what we need is the ability to sort of know what's the ballpark that we're in, not be bound by a very narrow box that you can't then be part of the conversation. So we have a set of those, which is helpful. We have a board that consists of, today, 27 people. It's a big board, although it's pretty close to this group right here, actually. I think you only had 24 around the table. I'm not sure, but we have 27, and they represent boards from all over Vermont in all different configurations. And that board meets monthly, and whenever stuff is happening in the legislature, we spend most of our meetings talking about those issues. And we ask people to do some consulting with other people in their regions, but we get a lot of our guidance from our board. And then what we did last year, I don't know how many of you came to the meeting we had up at Mount Mansfield in March. Did anybody here go to that meeting in March? There was in the middle of the consolidation conversation, H883, we felt like it was just too complex, there was too many differences of opinion that we really weren't feeling comfortable like going down any of those roads rigorously without really checking in with the membership. So we held 6 meetings around the state, one of which was at Mount Mansfield. We talked to several hundred board members, and basically the conclusion of that was we have a very divided membership on this subject. There are people who are desperate for some additional support from the state in terms of coming together, people that are concerned their schools are going to close. Some of your neighbors down here in the broader Mount Mansfield area who are putting their proposal to a vote again on town meeting. Some of those boards are literally desperate. Their voters have basically said, do something because we're not going to continue to support you. And we have other boards that felt it was absolutely the end of democracy to consider anything like what was being proposed. And what we did was basically tried to share the broad range, and we have continued since the legislative session ended to be engaged in the conversation about where do we go next. So the formal resolutions, the board meeting, and then trying to stay in touch with people enough to have the flavor of how we can best represent folks. And we also have a constant challenge, which I'll just put out there, which is one of our reasons for being is to advance the cause of public education. And so part of what we need to do is make sure we're well attuned to what school board members are thinking all over the state. And there is also, at some level, a calling to pay attention to what's in the interest of public education. So it's not only about if 40% of the school boards in the state want to hold on to the status quo at all costs, but most of their schools are going to go out of business. I'll just give you a small example. We have two schools in a small rural area over in Addison County, happens to be, where what's happened is that the number of students has decreased to the point where the only option left for a board when you've got 50 kids in your school is to cut phys ed, cut music, cut anything that is sort of out of the very few options you have left. Then parents with means start to say, well, I'm not sending my kid there, I'm going to send them to the Waldorf school. And then you end up in this situation, now you're down to 30 kids. We should not be, we as an association should not be promoting the notion that we're going to hold on to the status quo at all costs, even if it means that 3/4 of the small schools in Vermont go under because of our inability to adapt. So not that we're going to take a hard position on this subject, but we need to keep putting out there for school boards that the answer is not simply to hold on to what we've got, but we've got to continue to be forward-looking about what are we trying to accomplish for students? How are we going to do it in a way that is within a cost structure that the state will support? And boards need to keep asking themselves that question. Ultimately, it's going to be local boards that will make those decisions unless the legislature comes in and does some grand thing, which I'm always worried about. But it's a constant tension, and it depends on where this goes.
Well, thank you very much for coming out to visit with us.
It's great to see you all.
Everybody who wants a little bit more, on Thursday and Friday of next week, VSBA conference down in Lake Maury. If you're interested in going, the school district picks up the fee for going, so you should just let Sandy know, or just go ahead and, I guess the best thing is let Sandy know, and she'll get you registered. And you can come for 1 day, come for 2 days. It's really important work, so hope everybody can make it.
And I would invite you, if you have other thoughts after this meeting, questions you have or comments, feel free to send an email. I think our emails are all on here. And if you ever want to take either one of these meetings, or I know you do a common issues meeting or something between
Common topic.
common topics.
Would be nice.
If you ever want to use one of those meetings to take on some of these things that I've just touched on this evening, would be glad to come back and engage in a longer discussion about some of those issues.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, we got a little bit of time to make up here. So 6.2 is our policy discussion. Cindy?
We are in the personnel section of the policies and reviewing those over the next couple of months. Tonight's purpose is only to show you the recommended changes from the policy committee and get your input, so that at tomorrow's policy committee meeting, we can incorporate those and hopefully send back final versions for adoption at your November meeting. Any questions about the policies that were included or the recommended changes?
Actually, Cindy, I just have one, just to, situations where there's policy, which the board has, and that behind that there are procedures.
Right.
And the procedures are put together by administration. So those can be changed without board approval. That's the reason why they're separated, right?
If the policy changes, we look at the procedure to make sure we're in compliance with the new policy.
Well, as the CSSU board rep on the policy committee, Cindy and Kathy do a great job of organizing our materials ahead of time. And so much of what we were focusing on in this set is really getting the language appropriate to our current conditions, as much as anything. For example, it's not just criminal background checks, but there are checks on half a dozen other things. And so it's just, a lot of it is language adjustments. So Lorna was at the meeting as well. So if there are questions about the policy from the local boards, you might want to direct it to Lorna or I or Cindy, right?
Just a process question, was there too much information this month? I'm trying to give you more background so that you have particularly statutes that actually relate to the policy. Let your local know if I've given you too much information. We're trying to find the right balance.
Okay, 6.3, Act 153, 156. Megan?
Sure. So the first thing is, this is to start the conversation about the potential move of paraprofessionals employment to the SU. So I'll give a little bit of context, but also want to remind you that it's also on your local agenda, even though it's an SU board decision to gather input, and there are always more opportunities to talk about it, just since I know that our time is a little short today. But really quickly, the context which is in the Colt report is that the legislation very clearly gives the responsibility to the SU board to decide whether paraprofessionals are local employees or SU employees. At the time that we, last year actually, when we were under the understanding that budgets could remain separate, meaning each school could budget their special ed and pay for what they are budgeting, and for a number of reasons like paraprofessionals wanting to be tied to their school community, the recommendation was to keep paras as local employees for the 14-15 school year. Since then, as you all know, having been part of this conversation last year, when our understanding was that the entire entity of special education, including the full budget, comes to the SU, what we have now is a situation where the only piece of the organization that would remain local is the employment, meaning the paycheck color of support staff. And so we're opening up the conversation again for the board to reconsider location of employment of paras. We've had a number of conversations to sort of unpack what are the issues that potentially raises. Have met with support staff representatives, administrators, and are feeling at a point right now that some of the things that are most important from a administrative standpoint, flexibility to use the staff the way that we continue to use them, those are things that we can manage still and wouldn't change with the shift of employment. And also have had conversations with the association.
So I did promise that I would share what their concerns were, and we, Cindy, Megan, and I had a meeting with Fran Brennan and Bonnie Sykard last, Wednesday or Thursday. Neither one of them could be here tonight, but I told them that I would share with the concerns that they expressed. I think we, at the end of the meeting, believed that these were all concerns that we can address, but chief among their concerns is that control and direction would come from two different entities. That you'd have a CSSU boss and you'd have a local boss. And we shared that we had no intentions of changing operationally how we do that. We believe in a building-based a special ed administration model. We don't have like 3 people at the central office. We have people at each of our buildings, not all full-time, some half-time, but that's the model that going forward we would have. They're concerned about how seniority and assignment would work, and we shared with them that we had just gone through working that out with the teachers through negotiations, and that's how this would get resolved in the same way, and that actually we don't have necessarily an opinion. We understand that for many of our paras, they work in the community that they live in by choice. Many of them wouldn't choose to be paras if they had to travel, half an hour down the road. So we are totally not only open, but support working out language that would guarantee them that. They were curious about the basis for definition of special education paras because that gets to that flexibility piece. Some people work with IEP students with a service plan model for part of the day, but then they do something else. That doesn't change. They would still do their timesheets, time studies. Yep. Time studies exactly the way they do now, and we get reimbursement for that portion of the day that is dedicated to working with students on IEPs or providing special ed services. They were concerned about equitable treatment of the SU employees compared to the regular ed paras. So when we dug into that a little bit, it's, would the regular ed paras all of a sudden have to do all the playground duty and all the cafeteria duty? And we assured them that we had no intention of getting mixed up in that either, and that we care about that too, that all our employees are treated equitably, that it doesn't matter what color your paycheck is, you're going to have an assignment based on. the class of employee that you are. Retirement, which is something that Cindy is looking into, but as I understand, that's not just our paras. That relates to VEMRS, the employment, Vermont Municipal Retirement System. Supervision and assignment responsibilities, that comes back to, again, who's the one that's giving them their assignments. And fair share contributions, and that has to do with unions, and we said, that's a law, we don't get into that either. So those are the concerns they had. We really felt at the end of like an hour and a half or 2-hour meeting that they understood better. We're thinking that we didn't have any hidden agendas. We don't. There are no secret agendas here. It really is a matter that if you look at the chart that Megan included in the Colt report, it's page 5 of the Colt report, this little box here that shows everything, special ed professional contracts, special education budget entirely, special education programming entirely, and special education revenue entirely is at the SU. And the only thing that is lonely out there living by itself are the paras, and just the para contracts. So what the work, and this isn't the only reason to do this, but the work that is entailed in keeping that one piece separate, it doesn't make sense. It's like now keeping track of 6 different pots of money, billing it back. So I think based on the input that we'll get from you, obviously we want to hear what you think about this, but we might come back and change the recommendation that we made to you last year. This is the month that you'll be discussing it, getting input at the locals. If after tonight it looks like we need another month of discussion, we'll put it on for discussion again. And I don't think that we don't have to make a decision about this immediately, but when we think that you're ready for an action item, then it'll get put on the agenda as an action item. Okay?
So is everybody okay with what we're discussing? And so there's no money difference, the money's all the same. We're really talking about who holds the employment contract for special ed paras. Okay, and there's a whole lot of pros that you've heard. A couple of the offsetting things are the concerns about the paras who've always been very local employees and they're very comfortable there, and perhaps the administration in some of the local schools are more comfortable having those paras report directly to them versus bringing everything centralized, simplifying the organization with special ed all in one place. I'm oversimplifying the simplification too, but Lorna?
Let me get clear about the timeline. Right now, we're doing the mixed message, mixed
Everything
scenario.
except for para contracts is at the SU.
And that will continue until June
change it.
30th of 2015.
Regardless.
And so what we're talking about is thinking about maybe at that point.
Well, we need to know before then because we're developing a budget and service plan.
No,
Right.
to be clear,
Right.
up till June 30th this year, all we have is, all Megan has is the special ed professionals. All
Okay.
the rest of it is still at the locals.
Right.
But next July 1, we need to be in compliance
Which
with the
is-
full extent of the law.
Which is the budget we're talking about
Right.
at this
This
point.
describes what we're doing after July 1st next year.
But the law does not specify that we have to make the switch.
The law specifies that the SU board makes the determination.
Okay.
And so we believe that the locals would have something to say about this, and we want to hear what they have to say. But in the end, when we take action, it's at this board.
At this point, no. Okay.
Okay,
Josh.
thank you. Okay,
Can you give me 2-3 sentences, assuming that the administration is pushing for this, what's the compelling need to change, if any?
What's the what?
The compelling need to change, well, I guess I see it more, let Bob talk in a minute, but I see it more as like, why wouldn't we change? There's no advantage in keeping them local. If we agree that we won't move them, we'll keep seniority at the local level, it'll keep all of those pieces exactly the same. And the disadvantage of not moving them is that Bob, Cindy, Mike, and the whole finance HR organization has to maintain 5 separate pots just for special ed paras. it doesn't, and there's no advantage. If there were an advantage, if there was something we could put on the other side to say, but there's this. That's why last year, when we hadn't thought that out, we were like, why not? This is what they want. We don't care. But we're at a different place now. It is making for a lot of work. It was a lot more work this year.
Does this have to do with the ADM, the fact that we chose?
No, that's the same anyway. That's on the side that no matter what, that is SU.
But we're still breaking down, I mean, they still have 5 different numbers that they're charging each school, right, based on?
No.
No. No, not, it's a good question on what the compelling reason should be. If you understand the setting that the law has mandated that by July 1st next year, we consolidate special ed at the SU level and deliver services to the schools that we support, all of the resource moves to Megan. To keep a little bit somewhere else, there should be a compelling reason, some reason that we can't deliver services the way we've been accustomed to, or some element that makes that, because the intent is that it moves in its entirety. So that's how I'd answer the compelling. It just, you're likely going to regret it 2 years later, 3 years later, if you don't move it all as the law intends. The feature of the law on paras, I believe, was put in at the last minute to get the law in essence passed, and was a compromise to someone at the table who had a seat and a voice that was loudly heard.
But this is a good discussion to have at the locals, and as Elaine said, we don't have to decide next week. It's not, next month we can have another discussion at this board next month if we want, and then push it out to the next board meeting to vote. John?
I just have a question for Megan. Delivery or styles of delivery for our students would be more consistent school-wide, or would that impact at all? Or what do you see as you being at the helm? And maybe that isn't even about the paras, but the whole special ed piece.
Well, what I think is that having them local wouldn't change the work that's already going on around intervention systems, best use of staff, and we've really built our movement toward consolidation on this idea of standards of practice that allow local decision-making within those standards of practice, so that there won't necessarily be identical special ed models. In fact, I know there won't be identical special ed models. They will fall under that standards of practice. So that piece of it doesn't change whether they are local or SU employees.
How are we getting through this agenda?
That's what I'm wondering.
We need to put this off till next time.
Yeah.
But because I was confused about this, I just need a little clarity about what is different. Is there any new information now that we didn't have last November when we made this decision the first time?
We had no idea what the impact would be on HR and finance.
Okay.
To maintain, just for the paras, this very small subset of personnel.
Also, the understanding of funding changed.
Correct.
That was the other part of it.
Our previous understanding was that local special ed budgets could remain that you build your budget locally, and that is your budget, and that you get assessed based on what you have in your system.
So it is related to the decision to go to ADM, or we had to make that?
Well,
We did have to make
right,
that.
the decision, right, what it's related to is the need to pull the entire entity over, including budgeting. The decision as to how you assess, which ultimately was ADM, is less connected, but it is related to the fact that now we know that the entire organization has to come over, and that's really what changed.
Okay, except for the para which was left.
Except for the
as
para
a
employment,
decision.
and I think that's the important distinction, is that the decision-making, the budgeting, all of that still moves regardless of the employment, and it's just the employment piece that is that can be the one piece that the SU board makes the decision on.
So in the interest of time, I'm gonna at the board chair meeting, why don't we put on the agenda, we'll have a discussion, and I'll follow the lead of the board chairs if they would like us to put more time to discuss this, or if everyone feels clear and comfortable. Tony.
I just want to advocate that we discuss this again, because we had a lot of discussion about this a year ago, and we're very convinced that this was an appropriate decision, and I just feel like we're not ready to go to a vote, so I'd really welcome further discussion at this board.
Okay.
It's about saving you time.
Yes, okay.
We can forego the executive session. I just need all the locals to appoint somebody to the negotiating committee. That was all what it was going to be about, so.
So you're awesome, great. Okay. So do have the discussion at your locals, so you come up with the questions or concerns or whatever, so that in the board chairs, we can bring it back, and we'll definitely put it on the agenda for discussion here next month. And most likely defer any kind of vote decision until further notice. Okay, thank you. So we are on to 7.0 action matters. So I need to appoint a support staff negotiations committee representative. Is there someone from the CSSU board who would be interested in representing us at support staff negotiations?
Let me, I'm probably going to be the CVU representative, so.
You could do double duty?
Is that possible, or is desirable? I mean, I'd rather have company.
Yeah, is there anybody who's?
I would welcome it again, but,
Congratulations.
There it is.
but you know, if there are others who have a strong interest, we should have discussion about it.
I don't see anybody else saying they have strong interest. So, yes, because you can get elected, nominated by your board as well. So, why don't I, if you don't mind, Lorna, I'm going to appoint Colleen, and then that you'll be at the most likely be at the table anyway, unless we have a fantastic fight at the CVU board, who gets to be the representative.
I'll manage
To make a motion and.
Oh, I can appoint. I'm just appointing. 7.2, appoint, reaffirm members to board committees. It's the one that keeps getting pushed off. Now, thank you very much for those of you who did respond with your interests. I guess the best way to do this would be to, if you have it in front of you, we'll just start from the top. Legislative breakfast. I have Joan, can you continue? Do you mind continuing on the legislative breakfast committee?
Yes, yes.
Yes. Josh volunteered. Susan volunteered, Susan Grasso. I have Bob. Finn, you still want to be on it? Yes?
He's nodding yes.
Okay. Lorna? Sure. Okay. And Kristen?
I've never done anything on it, but if you need to show up first.
That means you're awesome at it. All right, thank you. Superintendent Evaluation Committee, let's see, so Deb volunteered again, Colleen volunteered again, thank you, I'll be on it. Two of you? Kathy's back in, and Joan's back in. Okay, anyone else have an interest in that? This is, okay. Administrative Compensation Committee, Russ has graciously volunteered to be on it again. Eric, you asked to be taken off this one, right? Right. Okay. Colleen, I'm pulling you off this one, so you don't have to serve on every committee again.
I'm good with that, thank you.
Joan, you wanted to be on this one? Yes. And Susan, you volunteered?
Okay.
Is there anyone else?
If Colleen's dropping off, I'll throw me in.
Oh, but you don't want to be on a committee with her? No, I
Well,
find out.
that's a separate
True.
discussion. But your email indicated that you might want some representation from each of the boards.
That's
and
true.
We like to
Colleen is
share
no
the
longer there
wealth.
from Heinsberg.
I see. Okay, we'll go with that, Keith.
Last time you
Spread the
volunteered.
Heinsberg goods.
Seriously.
Well, in that spirit, do I have a,
Kevin?
yeah, Kevin, I could probably talk him in there. Okay, so on page 2, so Colleen, you're a policy committee rep, right?
Yeah.
Yep, okay, thank you. So then it really leaves us with the two new ones, the SU strategic planning and our leadership committee, looking at how we're going to develop and move leadership forward. So I have, Josh and Russ have both volunteered for the strategic planning. I should say that Kevin and Colleen have both graciously volunteered to be on either one wherever they're needed. So I've got you guys in reserve.
I asked to be on that one.
Oh, that one? Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So strategic planning, I have Josh, Russ, Kristen, Kevin or Colleen. This would, what?
Bill Baker will volunteer for that.
All right. This one actually could be a happening committee, if, depending on what happens in the legislature. So anybody else on this board doesn't want to be left out? All right. So I'm appointing now. It doesn't mean I can't appoint more people later if you just come to your senses and say, I'm missing out on a great opportunity. I got to be on that committee. And then leadership. Susan was the only one brave enough to step up for that. Kathy?
I'm interested the time commitment we have to see.
Okay. And this will be, this one I'm not actually going to start until like budgets, March next, February, March next year, since we have a lot of work between now and then. So I just have Susan, Kathy, and Joan, and Keith.
Has an interest.
Excellent.
No whipping this time.
I don't like to say Jim
Improvement.
twice. So that one we might flesh out a little bit more as time goes by and people see what their time commitments are. So, the names as I rattled them off are the ones I'm appointing to those committees. Congratulations. Okay, 7.3, can I have a motion to, I wrote this one down because I was trying to figure out what the motion would be. Can I have a motion to approve the CVU Board's request for central office support for 3 articles this year, school year?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Keith. Second, Lorna. So Susan, you want to say a few words about what you're asking for? And
Sure. So we're asking for support, help with 3 articles. One on the process that we used this last year for teacher negotiations. One on the CVU school budget that might have a special education focus. And one on data-driven educational decision-making, probably in the context of outcomes and indicators. And the process that we've spoken to Elaine about that we're thinking is to have the CVU Communications Committee submit questions, a list of questions to the SU staff member. And that person would provide us with the answers to those questions. We would write the article and then send it back to the staff person to review it, make sure that we haven't misrepresented anything. And then we would finalize and submit the article for publication.
so the reason we're having this vote is that it really is a little unfair to have any one board ask for significant time from central office staff without this board being okay with it. So that's kind of what we're trying to do here. So, Elaine, do you have anything you want to?
No, we can comply with the request. I think I'm seeing Josh is looking puzzled, but the other reason to do this way is that let's say that Susan was asking for something that was going to take me or Megan or Molly or Cindy away from the work that they do for a significant amount of time. Then I might say, we really can't do that because we don't have the capacity. We would have to not do some other major piece. So I think it's important to make sure that what they're asking for is something that we really can do and it's not going to leave some other part of the work wanting. And in this case, we can say yes to all 3 of those requests.
The primary reason why I would support this, and frankly the only reason, is because the 3 that Susan has highlighted are generic and apply to all of us. So that's why I support it, and I would advocate that in the Q&A, the responses, or whatever material gets collected, that it would be presented to the rest of us so that we can use it for our own locals.
And the other thing was just to make sure that we didn't have all 5 boards asking for 3 articles and that sort of thing. In the communications, we did discuss that, and the K-8 folks around the table said, maybe we, if we thought really hard, we could come up with one other thing we might ask the CSSU staff to help with, but didn't even have it. So we just wanted to confirm that too.
I support the concept as well. I just wonder aloud from a process perspective whether it really necessitates us as a board authorizing it. It just, and I respect your concerns about resources, but it just seems inherently reasonable that CVU could ask for some information on 3 different topics, and if it wasn't burdensome, that the central office would provide that. And so I'm concerned that whether this creates the expectation, if any of our boards had similar requests that weren't burdensome, whether they would need to come
Right.
forward and make us.
I'd rather have a process so that we never get to the place where the request comes and it is burdensome, and now we have to have a big to-do about how do we deal with that. So I'd rather have the process beforehand so that it's really clear. And in fact, because of the way agendas get put together, I know what the requests are before it even comes here. I've already said to Susan like a month ago, I'm going to say yes to that request. You know, so there are no surprises, but at least there's a thought that we should be asking administration before we say, go do this, and without necessarily knowing if it means that they're going to either have to tap somebody else on the shoulder and they're going to get taken away from their job. Nobody's really sitting around twiddling their thumbs. That's the piece.
Okay, so we need to keep going, we need to
Yeah.
vote, so if unless there's something that's gonna keep people from voting, is there any other questions around?
Well, can we accommodate what Keith brought up, is the
Yes.
sharing? So can we assume that that's part of it?
Yes,
I think that's,
yeah, because we talked
A good
about
addition.
having a common
Yeah.
database for that kind of information.
Yep.
Okay, are we ready to vote? All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay?
Any abstain? Okay, the ayes have it. 7.4, award the bus contract.
In your packet, I described the situation that has us looking for a replacement bus. We were successful this afternoon in getting information for the 4th bid. You see on this bid summary, I'd like the board to award a contract to Anderson Bluebird for the bus purchase at a price of $48,532 based on price and delivery considerations. And it's being purchased directly because you're going to be the recipient of a large check from the insurance company. The vehicle that was damaged was heavily insured.
So the net out here is like,
That bid?
Hmm?
I move that we accept the
but I read the
Thank
net
you,
out was
Kristen.
like $6,000, right?
Right.
Okay.
So Kristen made the motion, Joan seconded. I'm sorry, any other discussion around this?
Is this Anderson one a new bus?
Yes, there are new buses except the one that says used bus.
Okay, thank you.
And the difference is coming from?
The $6,000 Ken will look to see if he can't do something favorable in the course of the year to net that out.
And our employees doing okay?
The employee is at home recovering. Thank you for asking.
Any other questions? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Any bus drivers on the board? The ayes have it. 7.5, audit committee appointment.
One of the more important things that you do as a board is hire an auditor and review their input to you on an annual basis so you stay out of that sort of trouble. We need a committee of the CSSU board to review the audits and present them to the CSSU board for final approval in December. This year the meetings will be different. There will be 2 meetings. One where you will be trained on what it means to be part of an audit committee, and the second meeting will be with your auditor once you've been trained to deal with him personally, to review the actual audits and make a recommendation to the board. We'd like the committee to include at a minimum the chair and clerk of the CSSU board and members from each of the 4 towns, because you're reviewing all 7 CSSU audits at the same time.
So that would be, would the recommendation be for it to be the clerk from, I mean, before it was I can't remember the prescribed people.
In the old days, when we did this 7 times, you as individual boards would have your chair and your clerk participate in the meeting with the auditor locally. What I need is just the clerk and chair for the CSSU board, but I would like to have at least one person on the committee from the 4 communities so that when the audit is approved for, say, Charlotte, somebody from Charlotte was part of that process.
But the person from that community needs to be an SU committee
Yes,
member.
this is an SU
Board
task.
member. Okay.
Yep.
So you really need somebody from Charlotte and somebody from Heinsberg, since we've got somebody from Williston and somebody from Shelburne. Is that true?
I think that's correct.
Bill?
Bill? Bill will do it from Heinsberg.
And Susan said she'll do it for Charlotte.
You'll like it.
Thank you. That's easy.
Excellent, thank you.
So, can I have a motion to, I'm gonna make this a motion since my name's on the thing.
Just as a point.
I know, I can appoint myself. Seems
You
a little odd.
can,
I
you can appoint yourself.
Oh, well, then
That is
heck.
one of the benefits of being chair.
Good. Okay, I appoint myself, I appoint Joan, I can appoint Bill, and I appoint Susan to the audit committee. And the rest of you are just gonna have to be jealous.
The membership, was that decided at the board chairs meeting? How was the composition of the audit committee decided?
We just did.
I decided that based on the minimum number that would be adequate for me to feel comfortable that you as a board are fulfilling your responsibilities.
It can
you
be
like to be on
more
it,
if
Josh?
somebody wants to be on it.
No, I was just curious whether this was a state mandated or where it came from, that's all.
No. What is state mandated is the CSSU board take action at its December meeting or November meeting to pass them all, or accept them all, I should say.
It's the only reason I'm the board chair, to make sure I get on this committee. We done with that? 7.6, Solar Opportunities Consortium. Can I have a motion to, what are we doing, Bob? We
You're
are,
going to approve an expression of interest, non-binding.
can I have a motion to approve the expression of interest non-binding on Solar Opportunities Consortium?
So for those in the legal end of
Wait,
things,
I need a
there's
motion.
really little risk with this
Thank you,
motion.
Kristen. I
But
need
it
a second.
it
Thank
allows you to
Deb.
participate in the work being done statewide to collectively approach solar opportunities in a manner that makes sense for schools. So it's good work, it's good that you're part of the group, and you're not committed to anything. If something comes out of that, it will be locally reviewed, blessed as a good idea for, say, Charlotte to participate, or Shelburne, or Williston. So that's why it's a non-binding expression of interest.
Do you know, Bob, is that consortium, are they gonna engage outside, advice in terms of somebody who's an expert in that particular field?
Yes, in two fronts. One is they're gonna utilize all the advice they can gather to develop a bid document that makes sense for schools in compliance with law that we don't have right now. And then they're gonna understand the landscape and the bargaining position schools have to better leverage the share percentage than we've been able to do independently. So it's good on both counts.
I don't understand why, I feel like these companies are preying on schools and school districts to come after us and feel the need to have solar arrays. I mean, there's large power companies that do a great job of supplying power to us. I don't understand why we have to manage having solar arrays. I think we should concentrate on educating our kids and keeping our buildings in shape and not installing solar arrays on our schools. So that's just my opinion.
That could certainly be part of the conversation, I would think. But that's the non-binding part, we're not signing up to do a solar array, but, no, I kind of felt the same way when I read it too, was,
Yeah, I mean, solar energy feels really good, but there's lots of people that can give it to us, so.
I guess it just goes to the point of, if it would only make sense if it were had a positive revenue impact, and that goes to the idea of having somebody negotiate it or engage somebody who knows exactly, what the numbers are.
yes.
For me, it's worth the investigation, because I think we are stewards of the building, we are stewards of our students' education, and looking at the environment, I think, is a piece of that. If it doesn't make sense, if it doesn't make financial sense, and we don't benefit by lowering our costs and our footprint and all that, then I would agree. But I think it's really important to investigate, and the non-binding piece to me is intriguing, so we can look at it. But I would broaden it, that our modeling of whatever we do, negotiations and how we heat and how we behave, or I think, part of our responsibility to, just a different spin on it, yeah.
Okay, are we ready to vote? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. Dave?
Sandy, I need the record to reflect that I'm abstaining from this.
Thank you, Keith.
My firm has been retained by the VSBA to work on this project, and yours truly will be one of the ones working on it.
Okay, can I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So moved?
Second.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you, Lorna. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Any abstains? Thank you. Our 9.0 confirmed next meeting date. November 18th is a regular meeting. VSBA conference, don't forget, it's not on here, but October 30th and 31st at Lake Maury.
Is the policy committee meeting really tomorrow morning?
I know.
That was the fourth week. I thought it was the fourth week of the month.
No, it didn't work out quite.
So we have an issue with the common topic because we've now spent most of the time that was supposed to be on it. So Molly, if you don't mind, rather than, I mean, everyone has the packet in their, in the mailing that went out. Could we have a conversation about it, or do you want to talk process? We could do just the first couple of slides, or what would you like to do? My feeling is that I'm not sure this is, you know, going through the data is less interesting than going through the process or what we've been discussing and where we're going with it.
Yep.
But I hate to do this when you've worked so hard on a presentation and we went over so far. So,
Well, thank you for acknowledging that. I honestly, as I've watched the time tick, I've been wondering just exactly what we should do. It deserves your attention, for sure, and a conversation, which is why I think the full amount of time was important. And you're right, the backstory of indicators and all that we learned in the process of putting this draft, which it is, together, is illuminating in terms of where we go and what we come to you years hence with indicators. So it's a trick. I'm a little stalled. I'm not really sure how to proceed. We could do, I could do this is just an option. I'm not sure I even like it, but I could do 20 minutes of the backstory and get you probably to the data. The data has a story also. And the other tricky part is that this is a lead-in for what the locals will talk about. So I hate to leave them high and dry. So it's a little tricky. I'm actually not quite sure what to do. But it is a tricky thing when a presentation's supposed to be 50 minutes, so I'm not sure. I think the conceptual pieces around what we've learned in the process, and you've heard me say many times, we're inventing this. We haven't done this before. And the reality sets in about decisions you've made about what you're going to track on the day that you say to people, oh, we're tracking this. And then they go, oh yeah, but I didn't realize that it was supposed to indicate a point in time, how everybody's doing. What this particular indicator is that we've had on the list for the past 2 years is really indicating to a teacher, how are the kids doing on this particular unit that we're working on in this time frame. And so not a good indicator. So those kinds of things, I know you've got some key points around things like that. Maybe would what I'll be do good is to highlight. embark and do that beginning part and know that the data's there, and then plan in the agenda next time around to leave Q&A. Does that sound workable? Yes. So I think I'll do it up there. Yep. Although I wouldn't have to. Okay.
To do this in 5 minutes.
It's Molly's birthday. Oh no. I realize that, well, good evening, hi. We'll just see where we end up.
And I realized too that oftentimes what you're accustomed to in terms of a data presentation is that extensive analysis of our kneecaps, and that isn't what this is. And I know you know that already, but I just wanted to be sure this is a very different kind of presentation. And it's our first cut. It's our draft, really, of our indicator work that still needs work. But hence, I have some notes. And I don't usually talk from notes, so I'm sorry if it will seem formal. But this really is formal. I feel like I should change my voice or something. Okay, so I want to start by saying that on Friday, I had the great experience, to Lorna's point, of hearing Rebecca Holcomb, our Secretary of Education, speak for, I've heard her 4 or 5 times. And she was sort of the preamble to an entire session on SBAC, which is the new assessment that we'll be taking in the spring that will test our Common Core. And in it, what she did, she talks a lot about assessment, as Lorna said, and deals a lot in assessment. And what she did, as I sat there, I thought, oh my gosh, there's the beginning, because she really does set the stage for us to think about our assessment system, the meaning of assessment, and hence indicators. So I want to quote her, and then we'll jump in. But she did put things in perspective with 3 points that I'll somewhat read. The first was, we must be humble about test scores. Never be on our high horse about them, as she says. And we do, because we don't always know what's behind them. We can guess and we can surmise, and there are trends, but in the final analysis, we don't always know what has caused what we see in a data report. So we have to be humble. And her second point was, we must not define our schools entirely based on test scores. And of course we don't, and I think everybody sitting here knows that there is a whole lot of other things that go on outside of testing, but that testing is one ingredient. And she just raises that cautionary flag after our experiences with AYP and how the entire state is now in detention. And so that's an important feature as well. And finally, she also said that we need to use test results for the right things. And for me, that coincided exactly with this presentation, because in the process, as Elaine said, we're in a process, and we're not out of it yet, by the way, learning about indicators and what makes a good indicator. And as Rebecca spoke, she raised exactly a slide that I had already made, which is about 2 kinds of assessment: formative assessment and summative assessment. And she made it very clear, without going into the master's level speech about it, that they're very different and they have very different purposes. And I'll just continue now because that will come up later, but it was just a great coincidence that there was Rebecca saying the very same thing. So I felt validated. So as Elaine said and I'm saying, tonight's presentation is about indicators. It's not the same thing as analyzing deeply our kneecap results. And that in order to talk about them, I want to give you our path and our journey in learning about them, because what we did was a mid-course correction as a group. And those of us who worked on this partway through thought we were going to head down one road with indicators, and we needed to turn the corner. So truly, I'm here humble before you to bring you a work in progress rather than something perfectly polished, which I'd much rather be doing. But it's not. And so, in Rebecca's words, you don't sell your car if the oil is a little bit low, right? So I didn't throw this away, nor did I bring you something half-baked that really needed correction. I'm bringing you the thing that we're in the midst of correcting. And so when your oil's low, you figure out how to improve the car. And that's what we've done as a group. So you're going to see that messy work. Okay, so the backstory. The core learning tonight that I want to talk to you about is our CSSU common assessments, which we thought were all going to become our indicators. I'll explain in a minute. I want to talk to you about the purpose and definition of indicators. A lot of time spent reading the work around the country, the research on indicators, and through that learned a lot. what we've learned that helped us sort of change course and develop this draft, and then you, I think, will have this to look at and bring back for questions, and you already have this, but I want to give you this backstory for now. So the common assessments and data collection, I'm going to talk about formative and summative assessment a little. The CAS, I want to do a better job all year long to explain our acronyms, because I know I haven't always done that in the past. The CAS is the CSSU Common Assessment System, and I will describe that to you, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do electronically to store and retrieve data, and that's through VCAT. And VCAT is the Vermont Common Assessment Tool, so I'm going to refer to those for this next section. Okay, and here I go. I'm going to talk, because I don't usually use notes, so I'm probably going to forget to use them. I think I should just forget it. Okay, formative and assessment, formative and summative assessment. So formative assessments are the immediate daily feedback that teachers get from students. They're both the things they plan to be assessing as they're working with students, and they're the things that informally they simply, as a seasoned teacher, glean. And they're the things that guide what we call teacher moves. Right there in the minute, a teacher will transition and change gears based on what they learned through a conference, for example, with a student. So formative assessments are the things that you want your teachers to use a lot, because it has to do with how you differentiate. It's the signaling from students that tells you what you should teach and where you're going, if you're going too fast, if you're going too slowly. Some examples, like I said, conferencing, conferring with students. Our on-demand writing assessment now being used around the state. Exit tasks, something that teachers do often to figure out what teachers got that day and how then to transition for the next day. Our inquiry task assessments designed here in the SU, those are formative. Summative, on the other hand, is cumulative. It is information that a teacher gleans that wraps up a bunch of learning and tells you what cumulatively a student learned. Examples of that might be an end-of-unit test, a mid and end-of-year test, a final project that has expectations that would demonstrate learning, and of course national and state tests. So we're in a bit of a shift here, and we're glad about that, to proficiency-based learning, proficiency-based grading, and in so doing, we're also happily leading and observing a shift away from the tremendous amount of summative testing that was going on, really, when we were growing up in schools and teachers relied on, to a more formative assessment strategy where this is cumulative and it tells you what skills a student got, and it also is something that is giving you a grade or a percentage at the end of a whole lot of learning, not specifically at this point in time. Formative assessment, on the other hand, tells you right then where a student is. So we want teachers to be here most of the time, and we're in a very nice transition to that point. So a learning for us is that some of the indicators we originally chose were based on formative assessments, which are the assessments that are largely in our CSSU, the CAS that I referred to, our document that gives us consistent formative assessments around the SU. And as we began to build our indicators, we realized they really didn't do the job. They aren't that specific amount of information qualitatively scored that would give us a reliable indicator. So we changed gears. All right. Here's just an example of the CAS. It's about now a 20-page document. It looks like this. It's not here so you can read this, but just so you know, there is a group of assessments given at every of our K-8 schools in the fall, in the winter, in the spring. There are dates when the data from those assessments need to be entered into VCAT. And there's a page for every grade level. This is literacy, this is math, and this is science. And the only reason I describe it to you is this is a tremendously systematic way for us to then build in when data teams happen, speaking of data-driven learning environments. A way for us to know there will be a data set in VCAT at a certain date so that teacher teams can get together and think about how their students did on those specific assessments and think about their units together. All kinds of things. This drives all kinds of consistency around our K-8 buildings. So the CASs are agreed upon CSSU common assessments, and it's a schedule of the administration of them. And currently they're under reconstruction so that they can be aligned with the Common Core and soon with next generation science standards. They're primarily formative, and they inform, as I said, intervention and teacher team planning and instruction. They're largely designed and written by teachers. There's a tremendous amount of ownership there, and that's exactly what you want. You want teachers to want to use these and to value them and to therefore every day have them influence their instruction. Our learning from this then is that these really drive the boat, and we're so glad they do, because this is about good instruction. This is about Tier 1 and Tier 2 and Tier 3. And we want teachers to spend their time here, but these aren't great indicators. But in talking about indicators, which are small slices about what goes on in a school, I don't want you to miss the fact that there is all kinds of assessment going on beyond them. So we're going to take, I will explain further, indicators at very specific points in the developmental continuum of a child. And some of them are very specific to what research says would be the right time to pull data that you want to measure over time. But make no mistake, though you will have a few indicators that we follow year to year to year, underneath that and beside that is a whole system of assessment that guides our work and makes it better and better and better. In VCAT, the Vermont Common Assessment Tool, we house data, we retrieve it, and we also generate reports about student work. And it is our mechanism by which teachers can very easily look up what they've been doing. So just a little statistics. I just talked to Steve and Judith today. VCAT, of course, originated right in Richmond, Vermont, and they now work with 20 school districts out of the 60 or 62 districts that we have, roughly a third of Vermont, and some 30,000 students have their data in VCAT. At any rate, I'm telling you about it because it's been a slow, steady process and also has a great influence on teaching, on being data-driven, and creating a culture that is responsive to students because the data's right there and you look at it and you make decisions. So since 2011-12, when we first brought it on, we've been cultivating teacher use, their understanding of it, and now they're valuing and relying on it. So basically it's a big electronic storehouse. So, I think that gives you just the slightest touch about how comprehensive our assessment system is. And it hasn't even branched into some of the things that are in your packet that we will use as indicators. So there's those, and then there's this backstory. And all of it led us to think very deeply about what an indicator is. So I want to tell you that. In the course of our work, we've decided that the purpose of an indicator is to tell the story, a big picture story, not the minutia of day-to-day data for a teacher, about the health and development of CSSU students as a whole. Academic indicators are intended to measure student learning described in the outcomes and provide a picture of learning at specific developmental points along the learning continuum. And some of these are very specific in the research. And were I to get to it, I would tell you about how important the end of second grade is in terms of reading and how it predicts a student's success later. So we are grabbing an indicator at the end of second grade in reading. Another very important time is end of 8th grade. So we've got a lot of extra indicators, but we're going to hone in on 8th grade. It's the end of middle school. It's a transition to high school. That's a pivotal developmental time to grab information, as is 11th and 12th grade, the end of the career, and what all has happened in between. Algebra 1, and when students accomplish that has become a tremendous gateway and predictor of success with math and going on to higher math in high school. That's an important indicator. So as we did our work, we pushed away some that really didn't give us the information we needed and are much more teacher critical, and those that are critical for your information to begin to really look at the organization. So what are they? They are performance-based information harvested at a single point in time. It's a pulse taken at the same time of year about the same things. So were we to use the wrong indicators, some of them get rewritten. Every summer I have assessment camp, and the coordinators come and teachers come, and with teacher input, we redesign the formative assessments that are in the CAS, because teachers know, well, you know what, this is no longer useful, it's not related to the Common Core, and we rewrite. So we can't use those for indicators. So very important that they be the same things year to year and that we harvest them at the very same time, so that it's something that is reliable for us to look at. Okay? And what have we learned? So we've done a lot of thoughtful work. I hope you hear that in what I'm saying to you. And the discoveries are that I realized a little while ago I wasn't going to bring you the perfect polished review of indicators the way I had hoped, that it's a work in progress. But I do want you to know that I'm very glad for the charge. I really am. That you decided and embarked on this outcomes and indicators work, because we have learned an awful lot. And in the end, when we get this right, and I come to you next time with the indicators, they will be right, and you'll have something you look at for the next however long you decide for, so you can think about us as an organization, and we can look at ourselves and say, what needs work here? And that's the goal. If your assessments aren't telling you that, forget it. You never want to give assessments for the sake of assessment. So it's a work in progress. We're learning what makes a powerful indicator, and we're fixing the plane while we're in the air. Thank you for letting us do that. So, for example, indicators should be tied to concepts and skills that are acquired irrespective of a local school, a local program. So for a while, we had Bridges assessments in here, and they should be able to go bye-bye, and we should still have our indicator. We mustn't wed these to a program, but more to what is it we want our kids to learn, and are we getting there? So you can see the process that we've gone through. We took each indicator we originally started with, and you have the original list. They're not all here tonight because they weren't all right, and we've adjusted them. They should be summative. There should be fewer of them. You just want these major spots along a child's career, and you want them to tell you about the organization. So we have way too many. And not that I'm not willing to do a whole lot, that isn't it. It's just that there are too many to really follow. And they should reflect student learning, as I've said, at pivotal stages of a student's career in learning. And some of those are well known in the research. Over time, I want to end this part. Over time, student learning and the performance data that measures it is going to reflect a transition to more rigorous standards. And you've heard me talk a little bit about that, not a lot, and I should talk to you about it at another time. But what goes on in the Common Core and in next generation science standards is not a joke, and not to underestimate. It's the bar has been raised, and what our tests will measure is far deeper, but also much more challenging. And I want to say here that we'll watch this happen in our indicators. We will watch, and I want you to know that no doubt there'll be a dip as we implement and learn to correct and learn what we're doing well and what we're not implementing well. So I anticipate it'll be very interesting for us to watch and learn from, and notice that scores are going to go down for a couple of years. Implementation dips are sometimes 4 years long. I don't want to hear that. You don't want to hear that, but it's possible. At any rate, it'll be very interesting for us to observe that. So, in conclusion, to be continued in a Q&A next time, after you give these a good look and ask me questions, I want to say that our work with indicators coincides with a transition from old standards to new, old curricula to new, old assessments now being revised to align properly with new standards, teacher-designed units that are gradually shifting to align with the Common Core, to align with new practices, align with proficiency-based systems of grading. All of these shifts are about increasing depth, rigor, and the application of learning. Our instructional practices and expectations, assessments, and curricula are all in transition. So what I want to say is we basically are doing this work, really good work, and out there nationally and throughout, it's a perfect storm, really, of all of this change coming at a time where we really want to define very specific things, and we can. But we're in the midst of a rapidly changing national, state, and local landscape regarding learning expectations, academic rigor, instructional practice, implementation of national standards, tech integration, I mean the list, personal learning plans, all kinds of things. So pat yourselves on the back. I want to pat all the people on the back who worked on this work that you're basically not really seeing tonight. To say that it's courageous, it's humbling, it's hard, and we will get there, but we really want to do it right. So I wish I could have given you this whole thing, but next time.
Next time, we'll get back to it.
I just want to say something, you know, also you heard earlier, those of you who were here earlier when Steve Dale was here, he gave a lot of compliments to all of you and to the system. And I think that the reason we have that reputation is because we do rely heavily on research and best practice. And everything Molly said, she's used those very words several times, and I know for a fact that in the work that she does with all the principals, that is what we do. We rely on research and best practice. We have a system that really is focused on consistency across all of our schools and all of our grade levels, at the school level, at the personnel level, at the practice level. And I think we have a culture, and you heard Molly say this. I mean, I wrote these notes earlier this afternoon, but I'm listening to you, Molly. A culture that's increasingly reflective, outward-looking, and data-driven. And I think that this is hard work. This is work that nobody else is doing. You talked about hearing Rebecca. I've heard Rebecca a couple times. She talks about what schools need to do is to figure out what the local indicators are. So we should be getting help from other people, but really when we set out to do this, we're on our own doing it. And I think Molly deserves huge kudos for tackling this, for managing the chaos, and out of that, you know, illuminating something that is going to be helpful in getting to a better place. And besides that, happy birthday.
Thank you, Molly.
Yeah, no, that's great. Gina, I just wanted to ask, would it be possible to email Molly questions that we have so that maybe she can compile answers?
Great, actually.
All right, I think we're done. Stand adjourned. Thank you very much. See you local board meetings.